So for a brief moment, all I had in that deal was about $100,000. But the gold we found in China pushed me into the $1 billion mark. And so what every gold bug is doing, they're looking for that junior miner who's going to take them to the moon. So when you get to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, you get to walk around and talk to all the guys like me who are pitching their deals. I found gold here, I found silver there, I found this here, I found that there. And I just want to give one good happy ending to my China fiasco, because I spent so much time in Vancouver hustling deals and hustling investors. I learned a lot about the gold business. And this year on July 8th, I took a gold mine public in Utah. But if I hadn't made all those mistakes in Vancouver, I would have known a great deal in Utah, and we found the richest gold mine in America. But because I was in Vancouver 10 years earlier. So you come to Vancouver more than just hit the triple, the 10 times, the 20 times, the 30, that one junior mine that goes through the roof. You come for the education to find out why you should be in gold. But that's why I'm very excited about attending a conference on January 29th and 30th.
I throw this event, that's why people come to it, so they can hear those stories, right? And individuals like Ross Beatty, he's delivered 14 companies that have generated a 10x return to his shareholders. I mean, these really are individuals who have been in the game for 40 plus years. In Rick Rule's case, he's been a vet for 40 plus years now. He reminds me every time he gets on stage that he's been in the junior mining industry longer than I've been alive. But, as a consequence, he's got scar tissue, right? And you can hear those war stories from him. And Rick's the first to tell you that he would have had to work half as hard and made 10 times as much money if he knew now, if he knew when he started this business, what he knows now. And if he'd only invested in the same 4 to 6 entrepreneurs. And so, it's very valuable when you come to a show like this to meet the CEOs who are going to be having that adventure with your cash. Like, can you trust this human being? It's hypercritical. That's why we put everybody in one room together. And, there's one divergent theme that we're going to cover at this show. And I just want to mention it real quick because it's a bit of an outlier. But, we've seen, I know most of your audience is American. This shows up in Vancouver, Canada. So I've got some Canadian specific content. And one theme specifically is we're seeing a rise in the provinces of Canada who are opposing our federal leadership. And this is very significant. And we're seeing that right now in Canada, which Canada rarely makes international headlines. We've made a bunch in the last 18, 24 months because of our federal leader. And starting with 2 right in the center, Alberta, which is like the Texas of Canada, it produces all the energy. And Saskatchewan, which is like the, Dakota, like it produces all the food, right? Have both put forward legislation, one being the Saskatchewan First Act, the other being the Alberta Sovereignty Act, which are strictly geared to separate themselves and protect them from measures put forward from the federal government, giving them the power to deny federal decisions within their provincial borders. And the media in Canada is covering this, saying, nobody wants this, right? The public is scared of this. And then the legislation is put forward and it's voted in favor unanimously, bipartisan support within the provinces. So you tell me if people want this or not. And this is a battle that's brewing right now in Canada. And
so this is like, you're like leading the trucker strike.
It's a continuation ripple effect. Yes, exactly. It's the ripple effects of that uprising. And it's very real.
As an American, that to me is interesting. Americans think of Canadians as nice, happy, peaceful people. And you guys lead this trucker strike, and now you're saying that your provinces are going to withdraw and secede. Like Montreal tried for years to secede.
That's right. That exactly in 1995, and they were remarkably close. They lost that secession vote by it was 49.8% or something ridiculous. But the steps are being put in place, the legislation's being put forward, and it's being approved provincially. And so I've invited actually 2 former premiers to come and join me on stage. One is the former premier of Saskatchewan, where this legislation, the Saskatchewan First Act, was voted for unanimously, and his name's Brad Wall. Phenomenal gentleman, resource bull, I would say. And the other is Christy Clark, who's the former premier of British Columbia. And I would say she plays the opposite role when it comes to provincial politics. And so I'm excited to sit down and grill both of them in front of my audience, who's going to have lots of questions about the direction of our country and the provinces, because You have a country like Alberta laden with natural resources. Saskatchewan the same, uranium, oil, gas, but they're landlocked. They don't have access to international ports, which is where a lot of their grief comes from, because our federal leadership has just stymied their ability to export the resources that used to make Canada wealthy, right? We've been a resource economy forever. Now we have the German chancellor arriving in Canada begging for natural gas, and our prime minister saying, I can't make a sound business case for that. It's like, well, we have it, they need it, let's do this. But instead we promise hydrogen power, of which we don't have any. It's ridiculous. It's this more, this virtue game that's going nowhere, but I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, so people will be able to, this is a historic event, but also it's going to be more business opportunities and investment opportunities for people who really want to get on what I call ground floor. Because I think it's kind of funny that, I played rugby against you guys, Canadians, all the time. And Canadians always go, CA, NA, DA, most polite rugby players we knew. Canada is a very rich country. And for those of you who are interested in getting at what they call ground floor and all this, I would go to the VRIC January 29th and 30th to learn from some of the rebels up there who are going to make history, because Canada is an extremely rich country. And with electronic vehicles coming on to stay and all that, I attempted to start a copper mine also in outside of British Columbia. That was a tough job, and but it's a tough business. And so that's why, if all of you who want to understand, one of the biggest revolutions going is in precious metals, but because we're going to have a pension crisis, social security crisis, stock market crisis, and if you're saving US dollars with a Canadian loonie, you're crazy, because they're going to start printing like crazy. So the same thing is going to happen in Canada, same thing is happening in the US as we speak, and that's why that balloon with a gondola is hanging beneath of it. Is, you look at America is now 31 trillion in debt. After 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, we didn't have that much debt. And now we're 31 trillion. If they push interest rates to 5%, that means the US taxpayer has to pay approximately 1.5 trillion in interest just on the US national debt. What is that going to do to the dollar? What is that going to do to the Canadian currency? And here we are, some of the richest two countries in the world, plus Mexico is extremely rich. But the average person has no idea about gold, silver, copper, lithium, all the resources that are required to run an economy. So Vancouver is going to be I wish you had more time, because I couldn't get around to see all the other little junior miners out there. I'd be standing there in my little booth, talking about, I was pitching my China for putting it on. Anything else people can expect to learn by talking to little junior miners and listening to the big dogs like Rick Rule speak about what's happening in movements of gold throughout the world.
Yeah, that's it, Robert. Every name that I mentioned, plus 90 more, will be giving 20-minute keynote speeches all throughout the conference. In addition, we do full hour deep dives into as many commodities as I feel are relevant right now. We're going to be going super deep into the supply and demand economics of gold, of silver, of copper, of uranium. And because, as you mentioned, the base metals right now are probably poised to skyrocket as well. It doesn't matter which direction the energy trend goes, the infrastructure required, the steel alloys required are going to put massive demand on copper and nickel. So lots of conversations. There's so many macro threads occurring at once. Anybody who wants to come, there's tickets at cambridgehouse.com. It's up in Vancouver, British Columbia on January 29th and 30th. And it's super fun. The nice thing about these events is if you want to come and meet Rick Rule, you've seen him give speeches for 10 years and you want to meet him, just come. Once he's off the stage, he always makes time to connect with the audience. As does everybody else. I encourage that from our speakers. They're on the floor to connect, to answer questions, get photos, whatever.
Stock players, like those Jim Rogers, who lives in, I think he lives in Singapore now.
Yeah.
He wrote the book Hot Commodities. and commodities are going to come on bigger than ever before. But every time I deal with stock guys, they think they're off in the wild blue yonder. The thing I like about commodity guys, they work with their hands. They're in the mines. You know, I've been in deep down in the mine pits looking for gold and all that. So we're not as high and mighty and think we're better than everybody else as we do in the stock market. So anyway, again, didn't you say that you're selling twice as many tickets this year than last year?
Yes. And I honestly don't say that boasting, Robert. It's like, it's a question to me. Why are twice as many people today interested in a junior mining or a resource investment conference than were 12 months ago? I mean, that speaks to the sentiment. And I can personally say I increased my physical gold holdings by 50% this year. And I'm not a novel thinker or a trendsetter. Typically when I'm doing something, yes, there's a wave of people doing it too, you know, and so I pay attention to that.